So what have I told you that one of the biggest reasons SaaS startups fail is not because they can't raise investment. It's not because they have too many competitors in the market. It's simply because they build something people don't want and subsequently fail to solve for product market fit. And the tough part about this is that most startups don't realize this until they're several months into their journey because they have some level of revenue, they have some level of growth that justifies their continued focus. But without a serious change or pivot, they're never going to be able to achieve breakout success. And the reason is simple. If you want a life-changing outcome like $10 million in ARR with high profit margins, then you must build something remarkable and not an undifferentiated company or product. And quite often this involves having an unfair advantage or a unique edge that puts you ahead of everyone else. So in this video, I'm going to be walking you through a framework that will help you in those very, very early stages of validating your startup so you can uncover these urgent problems. You can find that edge. And personally, as a founder, you can have that confidence that the next several years of your life that you're willing to invest in this startup are not going to be for nothing. They're not going to go to waste. So before I jump into it, because I have a habit of creating unhealthily long YouTube videos, just to show you some evidence that this stuff works. I'm not going to go through all of this one by one, but you can feel free to pause the screen or pause the video, take a screenshot, and you can see a lot of these videos on my YouTube channel as well. So who this is relevant for. So typically the founders we work with at Grow SaaS have these problems. So they're struggling to have conversations with their ICP. They're trying to acquire their first group of customers. They have customers, but they're struggling to acquire more. Prospects aren't take my money excited, or they're unwilling to commit. You're getting those like soft yeses, or, this is interesting, but people aren't willing to commit with their money. Being pulled in 101 different directions, but don't know where to focus. Don't have any replicable customer case studies, right? You're not able to repeatedly get results for your customers. That's probably going to be measured by poor activation and retention rates. Usually they do have these attributes and expectations. So these founders are willing to do whatever it takes. They understand that remarkable outcomes such as 10 million in ARR requires building a remarkable business. So not just an undifferentiated widget or an undifferentiated product, actually building something that's unique and people love. They move at the speed of light. They don't focus on low leverage, low impact, unproductive things, and they're okay with doing the hard things, right? What I'm about to talk through in this video isn't sexy, it's grunt work, but I promise you it's going to save you a lot of money and headache if you follow it like a maniac. So after working with over 50 B2B startups, here are the negative patterns I've noticed, and this is just so you can avoid. So too much time spent on product and not enough on learning from the customer and the market. Not building with a clear market, customer, and problem in mind. Prematurely scaling without having fundamentals solved, such as product positioning, ICP, product wedge, and retention. And thinking remarkable outcomes can be achieved without being in the top 0.1%, right? This requires so much more work than people think. And I think the reason why is because of survivorship bias. We see these companies that are doing so well, and we think if they do it, it must be easy. And I think everyone has that in them. They are capable, but I think they just underestimate how much work it's going to take. And the thing about these bullet points is that not a single founder, and I've spoken with hundreds of founders, I've worked directly with over 50, but not a single founder who makes these mistakes think they are doing so, right? Every single founder thinks their situation is different. These rules don't apply to me. And so you just need to be aware of these biases, right? We all have them. We all think, I'm unique, I'm indestructible. These rules don't apply to me, right? No founder I've spoken with thinks they're making these problems when they all have been. Now, why do these points matter? Because, like I said, building a remarkable company is extremely difficult, right? Not many people get to 1 million ARR, let alone 10 million in ARR. This is like world-class level. So I'm not here to bullshit you. I'm not going to offer you startup junk food that feels good, but doesn't actually help you achieve your goals, right? Startup junk food like this, like teaching you to scrape Reddit and just copy competitors and giving you a database of winning SaaS ideas that don't mean anything, right? That's not what you're going to get on my channel. So jumping into it. So overview, explanation of individual components and key concepts. So we're going to focus on the first stage within this framework. I think it's a 4 or 5 part framework. So I can confidently attribute most problems that startups who we work with are related to skipping or not being thorough enough in these early stages. And like I said at the beginning, the tough part about this is founders might have a decent level of revenue. It might be 50K run rate, it might be 500K, it might even be 1 million in ARR. But because they haven't solved these fundamentals, they're having huge scaling issues. And it's really tough to tell a founder who's doing 500K a year, $1 million a year, that actually, it's because you haven't solved these fundamentals. Everyone loves to focus on the sexy tactics. How do I write better cold emails? How do I do better ads? Nobody wants to address the elephant in the room. That is, hey, do you actually have strong product market fit? Have you actually built something unique? Are you actually differentiated against competitors, right? So my content is all about addressing the elephant in the room. So we're going to be focusing on stage 1, which is problem, solution, fit, right? So we're going to validate that a definable group of people have a pressing problem and your solution concept or wedge resonates enough to get at least a couple of pilot commitments, right? So inherently going to be for those at the earlier stages, but I strongly believe, even if you have revenue, you have customers, even if you have team members and you're doing okay, I think this is still worth paying attention to, because the reason why most companies struggle to scale is because they haven't solved for these fundamentals. So just a quick overview. So problem, solution, fit, that's the stage. Gate 1 is going to be market hypothesis and problem clarity. Gate 2 is going to be message hypothesis and differentiation. And gate 3 is going to be minimal lovable product and early commitments, right? So I'm going to break down each one of these. So they're going to be these stages, and then there's going to be milestones and activities for you to complete, along with verification steps so you know when to proceed. And then there's going to be a bunch of resources to help you move faster, right? So there's, very objective verification steps of, have you done this? If you haven't done this, then you need to go back and do it before proceeding. It's just to stop those sort of cracks appearing and enable you to scale when the time comes. The reason we narrow down on these stages is simple, right? Neglect these fundamentals and you'll accumulate what I call growth debt, which are these sort of extra headaches and obstacles that are eventually going to bite you in the ass when you try to scale. And this growth debt, it grows exponentially, right? The bigger you get without addressing it, the more it's going to hurt. And in a real sense, that means probably letting go of team members, having to have a huge pivot. When you have complexity in your business, such as process, automation, and people, those changes in direction become a lot more difficult. So I often speak with founders who believe they should be doing X, which could be, hiring a salesperson, when in reality they should focus on Y and Z, like nailing a primary growth channel for predictable lead flow so that sales rep actually has deals they can close, or defining a basic sales process so you're not throwing that sales rep into the deep end and they actually have something to follow, ideally a framework that you as the founder have developed and you have a proof of concept, right? A lot of mistakes happen here when you chuck early employees into an unproven area. And it can happen. You can do that. Sorry, there are people out there who sort of thrive in those situations, but they, as an early stage startup, you probably can't afford those type of people. So some common examples of this include delegating a function such as marketing or a task such as cold email before establishing a working proof of concept. Hiring an agency, this lead generation agency will solve all of our growth problems. Doesn't happen pre-product market fit. Publicly launching to a mass market without first validating the ICP and proof of impact with a controlled group, right? If your product cannot deliver impact to a controlled group of people, i.e. people that are warm, you have some kind of relationship with, not friends or family, but people within your network. If your product can't deliver an impact to them when you have so much involvement, it's not going to have an impact to a mass market audience that you can't hold their hand. Worrying about channel tactics when the value proposition isn't differentiated and lacks a wedge, i.e. these are fundamental business and strategy issues. Channel tactics are like the 10-20%, right? being built on strong fundamentals. This is the 80% that matters. When you solve this stuff almost becomes much easier. And you can, when this stuff is solved, you can make, when you have like strong product market fit and you've built something differentiated and you've validated those fundamentals, honestly, you can make so many mistakes and you can still win. Like that's how powerful it is. Put simply, startups are worrying about breaking a sub-4 marathon when they've only just learned to walk, right? So some key concepts, useful resources here. I'm looking at the time here. I think this video's going to go way over. So linear growth versus sustainable growth, right? So as an early stage startup who's trying to acquire its first group of customers, you should be focused on linear growth tactics, right? Such as reaching out to your network, sending one-to-one outreach, and engaging in communities, right? By linear growth, what I mean is your outputs are proportional to your inputs, right? So the more messages you send, the more replies you receive, the more conversations you have, the more customers you get, vice versa, right? Now, a lot of founders really struggle with this. And I think maybe because being a founder is something that's been glorified. It used to be this, what sort of, outsiders would do, nerds, misfits. And I think there's still parts of that today, but I think it's been glorified through content. And I think the implication of this is that people forget how much hard work it actually involves. And being brutally honest, a lot of people aren't willing to put in that hard work, right? And so I'm of the opinion, and I'm happy to be proved wrong on any of this, that words like automation, delegation, and outsourcing should not be in your vocabulary at this stage, right? You need to do the manual work. It simply requires sheer energy from you as the founder, right? Nobody's going to be as motivated, incentivized, or delusional as you to do this, right? You need that sort of toxic optimism to make it as a founder, right? Because every single day it feels like the whole world around you is burning. And so if you can't get through that, then somebody you're paying a flat retainer per month or a low salary, they're certainly not going to get through it as well, right? And so attempting to avoid this eat shit phase, which I call it, by introducing automation or delegating growth to an employee or a third party, it often ends badly and comes at a cost. And where I see this happen most is, a startup that's product market fit, they're stagnating and they try to bring in an agency to fix that. And the elephant in the room is there's a reason you're stagnating. It's probably because the product is not differentiated. You don't truly know the ICP, which is impacting your position and messaging. Those are the huge problems. Bringing in an agency to send some cold emails isn't going to fix that, right? Okay, yeah. So of course, linear growth is unsustainable. And so it should be modified as you gain that initial group of customers and your product improves as a result of feedback. That's when you then progress to sustainable growth, which is typically facilitated through what I call growth loops, right? So linear growth, inputs proportional to outputs. Growth loops are self-reinforcing systems, right? So they enable non-linear growth where the outputs can be disproportionate to the inputs, right? This is how exponential growth happens. Now, don't be fooled. Creating growth loops is a big task, and it will likely fail if you do it too early. If the product is bad, if you haven't got like good product channel fit, if you haven't truly validated the ICP, all of these things are going to break your growth loops, right? So only aim for sustainability after you have solid traction. You enter what I call PMF discovery, which is those earliest stages. You haven't made it. You're not out of the eat shit phase just yet, but you finally feel the momentum starting to switch. Until then, it's manual, it's founder leading the charge, marketing and sales, and linear growth tactics, right? And this works. Here are some founders that were really struggling to have conversations with their ICP and get customers. I have an entire method wrapped around this. And when I shared that with them, things changed. So that's linear growth versus sustainable growth. Now, another key concept here is the 5 core components of a business. So product market fit might be the ultimate goal, but underneath product market fit, there are these several different micro areas that must be solved. And I refer to these as the 5 core components of a business, right? We have the customer and jobs, we have the value proposition, we have the model, we have the solution, and we have the growth channel, right? Each of these components consists of activities to be completed, hypotheses to be formed, validated, and refined, right? And so at any given point while you're in pre-product market fit hell, it's likely that you're trying to validate at least one of these 5 components, right? Every conversation you're having, you should have that in your mind that, okay, what am I trying to validate? What's the weakest or the riskiest assumption I have about my business at the moment? How can I validate that in this conversation, right? And so in every conversation you're having, you're trying to stress test these because, at any given time, we have these assumptions. I think this is the customer. I think this is what they care about. I think this is why they would buy. I think this is what the product needs to be. I think this is what we should charge. These are all assumptions. And so every conversation you're having, you're trying to validate these assumptions until you have that level of confidence to execute, right? So just explaining these components. So the customer and jobs, this covers both the company and persona that would be involved in the purchase. Can often involve multiple customer types. So in B2B, you might have an end user, you might have a champion, and you might have a decision maker, right? These are all different customer types. Why I say jobs and not problem is because problems are cheap, right? We all have problems. Just think about your own problems right now. You probably have several of them. That doesn't necessarily mean you're willing to pay money to solve those problems. It doesn't necessarily mean they are urgent, right? Got collecting post. It's a problem, you need to do it, but you can't be asked. And it takes you weeks to finally get your ass down to the post office, right? And so that's why digging for problems isn't good enough. You need to understand the jobs to be done that your customers have, because it forces you to think about the customer's functional problems and their priorities and their projects. They've got 10 problems on their to-do list, their hypothetical to-do list. What project or trigger event forces, problems to come to the top of that to-do list? What forces them to have those levels of urgency that are going to make them go in market and look for a product? We're trying to get to that level of detail. The value proposition. So this solves what do you do and how does it benefit me? So it bridges the customer and your solution. The model, how, when, what, and the amount you charge. The solution, so this is comprised of your product and any additions you might have, such as professional services. These fulfill the promise made in your value proposition. And then growth channel, how you intend to reach and convert customers. Right, let's go this. So relationship and refinement of components. So each component is dependent on the one before it, right? So example, you can't create an effective value proposition without first deeply understanding the customer and their jobs to be done. And so as such, you should attempt to validate a component to a degree at which you have the confidence and data to proceed to the next component, right? All begins with the customer, right? Otherwise, how do you know what product to build? How do you know what they're attracted to? How do you know how much money they're willing to charge, right? And I think the fundamental issue here is that most startup founders start here. This would be a cool idea. I'm going to build this product. How can I force people to buy that? And so each component could be iterated. So you just consider this as an example. The customer is a PMM, product marketing manager within an early stage startup. Value proposition 1 is related to the enablement of product launches, but you notice a different problem set related to competitive intelligence, which is also a PMM's responsibility, with a higher willingness to pay, which becomes value proposition 2, right? So the customer has remained constant, but we've iterated the value proposition, okay? I've said that here. So this might impact subsequent components, e.g. if the problem is bigger or it's a different problem altogether, then the solution needs to look different to solve that problem, right? Or you might be able to charge more money because that second iteration of the problem is bigger, more urgent, and so therefore you can charge more money, right? So just to keep that in mind is that you might iterate through any given component multiple or several times until you arrive at that sweet spot where you feel like you've found product market fit. I'm not going to go through this. This is a key part of this video, conducting structured interviews. If insights are the output you're looking for, then conversations are the input that you need to get there. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to leave a link in the description so that you can download our complete method for these interviews. The questions you need to ask, how you need to approach these structured interviews. So you are stress testing those assumptions, and that every conversation you're having is getting you a step further to insight. So, so a bit more about this stage. So this is validating your market assumptions, forming a strong value prop before committing months of time and money to build a product that nobody wants. Why it matters, because the biggest reason startups fail is a lack of PMF, which comes as a result of not validating fundamentals enough. The goal in this stage then is confirm there's a definable group of people with a pressing problem and that your solution resonates enough to get commitments. the gates we're going to go through in this stage: market hypothesis and problem clarity, message hypothesis and differentiation, minimal lovable product and early commitments. And just basically, I'm rushing through this slightly now, but just to hit this point home, a founder recently got in touch with me, quit his high pay and cybersecurity job, moved to Dubai, probably getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, quit that job to start a software company, had basically pumped all of his life savings into building this product, said, look, Liam, struggling to grow, can you help? Turns out hadn't spoken with a single person to try validate the problem or the product, didn't have a wait list, didn't have any beta customers or design partners, just kind of, head down, built the product. And, obviously it didn't work out well with him. I think he actually had to quit the project and go back and get a job, right? So this is really the stakes that I hear, for founders, right? It can financially wreck you if you approach this in the wrong way, and you can just end up building something that nobody wants. So jumping into gate one, which is market hypothesis and problem clarity. So your situation is you have 0 or near 0 paying customers, and you're forming initial assumptions about who you want to serve and what problems you want to solve, right? So I'm going to go through for each of these gates, consider these gates as like milestones within the stage. Key concepts to understand, which is sort of like strategy, activities, so the actual things you do, which is more like tactics and execution, and then verification, which is how do you know you've completed this stage, right? So it's very objective. It's not based on what you feel. It's like, have you done the work? Okay, yes, proceed. No, go back and do more work. So going to be going through 3 gates, right? Gate 1, gate 2, gate 3. So gate 1 then, key concepts to understand. So completing structured interviews. This is basically just talking about structured interviews. So in the early stages, I think a common mistake founders make is that they go into these conversations, they start, they share their screen and they just start talking through their product, right? You should not be entering these conversations with a product first mindset, i.e. talking about your features, talking about integrations, talking about, even showing your product. Instead, the objective in these conversations is to learn, right? Learn more about the customer, learn more about the problems they have and the jobs to be done, and learn more about the value propositions they care about, right? Really, you shouldn't be showing the product until you've had like a couple or a few dozen structured interviews, right? A huge mistake that founders make. And as I said here, always trying to stress test or validate the 5 core components in these conversations. As time goes on, validate the component or associated hypothesis you deem to be the riskiest, right? So what I mean by that is if we've got the 5 core components of a business here, at any given time, one of these is going to be the riskiest. Okay, clear on the customer, their jobs to be done, clear on what they would find valuable, just really not sure on how we deliver that through the product, i.e. the capabilities and the features that the product needs, right? So through these interviews, you're always trying to validate the riskiest assumptions that you have. Again, if you want access to the method and script for these interviews, just comment below, or I'll try to put a link in the description. Talked about this before, focus on the jobs to be done, not only problems. And, we all have problems, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're willing to pay money or time on solving those problems. And narrowing your focus. So this is a really important one and something that people pay lip service to. Is that even if your product can inherently target a broad audience, or if you build your dream, to build your dream $1 million company, you need to attract tens of thousands of customers, you should still start small, right? This is going to allow you to find a good wedge. I see this all the time. Happens more frequently with horizontal startups. So horizontal startup is a startup that can serve, different verticals. So something like a cold email tool or something to do with like data, recruitment industry can use that, software industry can use that, healthcare industry, right? It's a horizontal startup, but for success of a horizontal startup, you should still start with one vertical, one customer, one problem, and then over time expand to the different verticals. And so when I say narrowing your focus, this can either apply to the customer, so just trying to make one customer successful, and I mean that literally. You can have this grand vision of how you're going to get to $100 million, but if you can't make one customer successful, you can't make one customer happy enough that they will give you a testimonial or case study, then you're going to really struggle to make anyone else happy, right? Narrowing on the problem. So, to make this customer successful, you're probably going to have to focus on a very specific problem. This is an issue experienced across all types of businesses, agencies, software companies, e-commerce. When you're trying to solve too many problems at once, you're just doing an okay job at all of those problems. But to succeed and reach strong product market fit, you need to do a great job at solving one problem. And then narrowing your focus on the solution, right? Building a great product is tough. And so you don't want to make it difficult by overcomplicating things, just trying to do too many things out of the gate, right? So that's what I mean by narrowing your focus. Now, I've used the word wedge a few times. So a wedge focuses on a specific problem or feature that is not adequately addressed by current solutions, and it serves as a narrow entry point where energy can be concentrated, right? So the wedge aims to differentiate and gain initial users by addressing a unique pain point. So in simple terms, your product does one thing very well to get an initial foothold, small area of focus, which results in high concentration of impact, right? Here's a guy cracking open, a multi-ton rock with a hammer, a sledgehammer, and some wedges, right? Because these wedges allow him to concentrate his force into a specific area, which then expands and splits the rock, right? If he just started hacking at this rock with hammers, even if like 10 guys started hacking at this rock just with hammers all around the place, right, they wouldn't be able to split it down the middle like this. And so some examples in practice of wedges. So Twilio started with an API to do SMS. It's now a $10 billion public company that is the go-to communication platform. Stripe started with payment APIs for startups. Now it's one of the default payment providers for online businesses. And Clay, which is a recognizable name over the last few years, they niched down to outbound use cases for lead generation agencies. Now, once they've reached 6x growth and 10x growth year on year, now they're expanding to other go-to-market teams, such as marketing or marketing ops or rev ops, right? If they tried to do that out of the gate, they would have never achieved the success that they've had today. Right, so activities, just make sure I'm on the right one. Activities for gate one. So activity one, you want to draft your hypotheses, right? And before speaking with customers, you need to know what to speak with them about. You need to have a strategy. It's another mistake founders make, is they're just kind of hopping in these conversations willy-nilly and not having a strategy. What assumptions they're trying to validate. What do they actually think the current value proposition is? What are their assumptions related to the customer, right? So physically write these down. It's important to have that stake in the ground when you stress test and validate these core components, and you have a point of reference. You can go back and change the notes. I thought it was this, actually it's this. And it's actually good to have that paper trail because amongst all the other things you need to deal with as a founder, it's easy to forget. So to write these hypotheses, just cover the following points. So for the customer and jobs, you want the industry and company attributes, firmographics, target persona demographics, jobs to be done for this persona. What does an average week look like for this persona, right? So a good test on whether you've actually solved this component is you could jump on a 60-minute industry-related webinar or podcast or presentation, and you could confidently handle any questions or topics thrown at you, right? So you basically need to understand your customer so much that you could pretend to be your customer, and because that's how deeply you understand them. Now, to keep in mind, particularly for the early stages, is there are two customer categories to validate, right? So category one, you have what are called early evangelists, right? So these are likely customers that are in your network or audience, and they're superheroes, right? They understand things are scrappy. They understand your product might not be that great, but they're willing to take a bet on you, right? These are like the early adopters, and they're willing to work closely with you to turn the product from bad into something good that can then eventually attract future customers, right? And important to note here is that this is sort of a misconception, is that just because they're taking a bet on you and willing to use your products and give feedback doesn't mean they should be your friends or family, right? They shouldn't be doing this as a favor. They should roughly align with your ICP. They should be willing to pay money, and they should have an urgent problem that you're solving, right? So this isn't just like going to your friends and family like, hey, can you try this product and be an early evangelist? These are people that have a problem you're solving. We then have future customers. So these are the best fit customers. which when refined over time will materialize as your ideal customer profile, right? This is where you're going to get the most money, the highest average revenue per user, the highest ACV, the highest net dollar retention. But initially, the requirements from this sort of customer profile you probably can't fulfill yet, right? Maybe they need a certain security certification, or maybe they need certain enterprise features that it just wouldn't make sense for you to build yet, right? So don't be disheartened if you can't attract this type of customer yet. It will happen, right? As wherever it was, sort of those companies that niche down first, right? Eventually they could go up market to mid-market companies and enterprise companies. But when you're starting, inherently you probably have, your product probably isn't great. You only have so many resources. And so it just doesn't make sense to go after these future customers yet. And if they're saying no, don't take that as like invalidating your hypotheses. It could be that you're just targeting the wrong type of customers, right? So really important nuance to understand. And if you're having these conversations and you're a founder with a product now, you probably can relate to what I'm talking about. So the value proposition then. So to hypothesize these components, cover the below points. So what benefits can we deliver to this persona? What makes us different to alternatives, and why now, right? Heavily related to sort of the projects under the jobs to be done. The model, so how will we monetize? Most common is going to be subscription. How will we charge? Most common is going to be upfront or free trial. What will we charge for? Most common are going to be usage-based or features. And what amount will we charge? The solution, so that's product features, which are the technical aspect of your product. The product capabilities, so this is the action or steps that the feature enables. Integrations, professional services, and delivery schedule. How long is it going to take you to build and how much? And then growth channel, how will we reach customers? How will we convert customers? Early thoughts on potential growth loops, right? So get this all onto paper. It doesn't have to be physical paper. Put it in Notion or a Google Doc or something, but have that stake in the ground. It's mind blowing how many people just don't sort of set the strategy or the vision of their company before starting to build product. Second, conduct structured interviews. So again, I'm not going to cover that. Document learning and patterns. Again, this is a huge thing, right? If you're heading in the wrong direction, then change, right? So as you have these conversations, it's important to pause and reflect every so often, right? There's no use in having conversations with people if you're not using those conversations to develop insights and to inform your strategy, right? So look at the patterns, challenge your previous assumptions. Are they right? Are they wrong? Refine them, and then write down your conclusions, right? Be intentional about everything you're doing. It's just such a waste. Like, reaching out to people and having conversations and having calls is tough, right? And so just don't let them go to waste by taking them serious and being intentional, right? So a rough sort of model here is, after every 10 people you speak with, just assess and adjust. What are the patterns? Do I need to update my assumptions? Speak with another 10 people, assess and adjust, right? Until you end at that point where you're confident who the customer is and what you need to build and what they care about. So some questions to ask yourself. Are they reacting positively? If so, what gets their attention? Are there any patterns with regards to what persona types react positively? What changes are needed? Can you accurately describe what an early evangelist and future customer looks like? Do you need to refine your approach or a complete pivot, right? This is very much a real option here that I think too many companies avoid for too long, right? So summarize the top 2 to 3 problems that are being repeated and then rank them in order of urgency. Again, this is something we cover in the structured interviews method of kind of stack ranking the problems that you're trying to solve. So verification for this milestone within stage 1. You've had 10 to 15 structured interviews and can effectively share patterns that emerged. You can articulate a crisp problem statement, right? You actually know the problem you're going after. And this sounds simple, but most people struggle to do this without being vague and abstract. So I've got a framework here for breaking down a problem statement. I think I'll just skip to the end. So an example in practice of a good, thorough problem statement. In mid-market B2B SaaS, the VP of marketing is responsible for generating a steady volume of qualified leads. However, these teams struggle with constantly decaying lead data. Over 30% of contact info is outdated within a quarter. This leads to wasted ad spend, lower pipeline efficiency, and frustrated sales reps who chase leads that aren't a fit. Most rely on manual data cleaning or generic data enrichment tools that are expensive and poorly integrated. As lead volume grows in a competitive market, these manual processes can't scale. Marketing leaders are now risking missed quotas and high churn if they don't fix the data issue quickly, right? This gives us a problem that the customer has, right? And we've got alternatives, the implications of these problems, right? This is like what a good problem statement looks like. Then we can think about how that's solved, but only first if we're clear on the problem. All right, so gate 2, message, hypothesis, and differentiation. So situation by now is you have confirmed people have a problem after several structured interviews. Now you should form a value proposition that addresses it in a unique way, right? This is going to be your wedge. So you're testing whether real prospects say, yes, this is different and we'd love to try it and we'd love to pay you money, right? Now just know, obviously I'm just reading through a doc here, going from one stage to the next. Like in reality, you as a founder, this can take several weeks, potentially months, depending on, how fast you execute, right? So just be really conscious that you should be verifying milestone 1 before you progress to the next one. So similar format, key concepts, activities, and verification. I think the following gates are shorter than the first. So key concept to understand for gate 2, first one is value propositions, right? So a value proposition clearly describes how your product benefits users. It answers the what do I get from this question and can be delivered in different formats. A huge mistake founders make is ideating or writing value propositions based on their intuition rather than real data from research, or another way to put it, based rather than their customers and their problems. If you're writing random value propositions based on what you think sounds good, you're doing it wrong, and this will often result in vague, high-level business outcomes that sound applicable to any B2B business rather than your specific company, right? I've had this a lot. Founder will tell me their product's value proposition, and it's very easy to kind of nod your head and be like, yep, sounds good, sounds legit, right? But it's never specific enough. And I think a struggle that founders make is trying to distinguish between like the company vision, this is how we're going to take on the world and, achieve this huge outcome. Distinguishing between that, which is what they sell to investors and internal team members and, peers, to the value proposition that your product has today, which is specific. It's specific to the customer's problems, right? The customer doesn't care how much money you're going to make or how big of a company you're going to be, right? They just care about how you help them finish their project and help them, not get fired or achieve their objectives, right? So the 3 inputs required to create a value proposition. We've got product capabilities, features, and benefits, right? A quick side note here, messaging is not copy, right? Messaging is the what, whereas copy is the how and can be tailored based on persona, channel, geography, etc., right? So don't worry when you're thinking about your value proposition, your messaging. Don't worry if it doesn't sound sexy. A lot of this stuff is just internal, going through the motions, building those solid foundations. When it comes to putting it on your website or putting it on any channel, email, social, etc., that's when you can then tweak it, right? So very simple value prop statement. We help ICPs solve problem by unique approach so they can outcome. And there's many ways to skin this cat. I might even have a different one in a minute. So product capability. So a product capability is the action or series of actions that's enabled by a feature, right? And they usually begin with a verb because they are action oriented. And I think product capabilities are a cheat code to clarity because it forces you to stop thinking about features, i.e., the technical impressive aspects of your product, and it forces you to think about the functional reasons why a customer would hire your product, right? That customers are often purchasing software to achieve some kind of functional workflow, right? And so capabilities nicely connect with that. So some examples: use custom filters to find exact customer case studies you need. I've just pulled these from random companies. Give your reps a self-serve library of customer evidence. Send AI-generated messages to your email sending tool in seconds, right? These are all examples of capabilities, right? Beginning with a verb, action-oriented, right? The champion that is browsing your website, they're probably not directly linked or responsible for the company's revenue, right? They just care about the problem that they're trying to solve, the problem that they're responsible for, Product features, and so this is the technical aspect of a product. Notice how by themselves they don't provide much context. They are worthless alone in the eyes of the prospect because they don't solve for that implication, that so what. So some examples: this is the capability, this is the feature, custom filters, case study library, right? Capability, feature, instantly integration, right? By themselves, it doesn't solve for that implication. Okay, what can I do with this? How does it help me? Product benefits then, so the outcome realized by the user when they use the product, right? So some examples: save hours sifting through internal drives for relevant case studies, improve opportunity win rates, launch high-performing cold email campaigns faster, right? Notice how nothing here says increase your revenue, increase ROI, increase, whatever, which are all business outcomes. And I think I'll talk about that in just a second, right? We're speaking to the functional benefits that the customer is hiring the product for. Okay, so then turning these inputs into value propositions, which is where we bridge that capability to the benefit. We help ICPs solve problem by unique approach. Typically, unique approach is going to be one of the primary product capabilities that you have, so they can outcome, right? What they're hiring your product can do. So we talked on this briefly, business outcomes versus benefits. None of these explicitly mention revenue, right? And this is because revenue is a business outcome, which is the responsibility of the CEO or the founder or, CXOs, the C-level leaders, right? If you're targeting SMB, sort of 20 employees and above, mid-market or enterprise, you won't be speaking to the CEO or even CXOs, right? Because they don't go around browsing software company websites and booking demos, right? They have teams to do that for them, right? They have department heads, mid-level managers and ICs, individual contributors, who are doing that on their behalf, right? But those CXOs might come into the conversation at a later point, and that's when they're going to care more about the impact to the business, right? But the CXO isn't going to care about, saving hours, sifting through Google Drive. They're going to care more about the business impact. But you don't put that stuff on your website, right? So benefits are more specific and tangible. ICs, middle, and often senior managers don't viscerally care about business outcomes, right? They care about their own goals and their own activities and their own projects and hitting their OKRs, right? That's what they care about. And so talking too much about business outcomes can result in messaging that doesn't resonate with your target personas, right? For example, a sales rep is likely to care more about the 4 hours they're wasting in Salesforce every week, updating CRM fields, and caring more about their individual quota attainment than the company's overall revenue, right? The sales rep just wants to earn as much money as possible and keep their job, right? And, updating Salesforce is a pain in the ass that they feel every week, and because their manager is on top of them. These are the problems that they feel, the things they care about. They don't really care about if the company hits their overall target, as long as they hit their own, right? That's the CRO's problem. That's the CEO's problem, right? This is how people think. Now, an important caveat here is that this is not to say that your product shouldn't be linked to business outcomes, right? It should, but you're just not communicating that through your channel messaging, right? This is why sales processes exist, because you're making that business case in the sales process, but that's not the hook you use to get people into the sales process. Now, there is a lot of nuance there, and sometimes it's actually the internal champion that will create that business case for you, and they like the product, but they then have to justify that to their seniors and make a business case, and typically you would support them with that. But the champion themselves, isn't going with your product because you're saying you can 10x their revenue. So value proposition enhancers, proof evidence, of course, makes everything you say more believable. Pretty simple. And then uniqueness, right? So if what you offer already exists in the market and doesn't feel novel, you will struggle to receive positive feedback, right? So uniqueness can come from a new mechanism that your product offers, like a new capability, a new way to cut costs and save time, or an angle that nobody else has, right? Differentiation. So concept number 2, positioning and contrarian edge. So positioning establishes your place in the market relative to existing alternatives, right? And these alternatives could be other vendors, could be do-it-yourself solutions, i.e. they're manually solving the problem somehow, spreadsheets and manual work, or even, inertia, doing nothing, right? So I think a common mistake that founders make is they think, oh, we're competing with this product and this product and this product. Sometimes you're you're actually competing with nothing. Like the customer is just not solving that problem, or they're using manual processes, right? So positioning answers the what makes you different question. And without strong positioning, your target customer may lump you in with every other nice to have product, or ignore you because they think you're the same as something they already use, right? Just a point on positioning is, I think if you're sat there like, I don't know what our value is, I don't know who we compete against, I don't know what the customer wants, these are typically all positioning problems, right? So the nitty-gritty details of your product and your story don't matter if you can't hook someone's attention right away with good positioning, right? Position influences the market's perception of your company, right? And if you don't influence the market's perception of your company, something will, right? The prospect will create their own perception, or a competitor will set the perception, right? So this is this is why product position is really, really important, because it influences, ideally controls the market perception of your company. And side note, if a prospect compares you to something that you're either not competing with or you're better than, this is a positioning issue. They don't know what bucket to put you in. So primary types of positioning, we've got audience-based positioning, and then we have competition-based position, right? So two types. So just to talk through these, I'd say audience-based positioning is the best option for founders, unless you're a serial entrepreneur, you've built multiple companies before, and you know exactly what game you're getting into. So this starts with your audience, and then there are sort of two subtypes within this positioning. There's product-led and competition-led. So in product-led, audience-based positioning, you begin with a clear picture of your audience, you figure out how you can solve a problem for them, and then you differentiate against existing solutions, right? In competition-led, audience-based positioning, you begin with a clear picture of your audience, so it all starts with the audience. However, you then identify what solutions they are currently using, so you know what the alternatives are, and then you discover something you can do that the existing solutions cannot, right? So a slight nuance, got that visualized here. Oh, we're making mistakes here. So example of product-led audience-based positioning, you know you want to target PMMs at mid-market B2B SaaS companies. You discovered that gathering competitive intelligence is expensive and time-consuming. You believe aggregating and combining a contextual layer, i.e. a so what, to multiple data sources could give PMMs better and faster insights. Existing competitors are expensive and focus on one data source, i.e. such as monitoring your competitors' website changes. And so a potential option is to aggregate these data sources in one platform and offer orchestration capabilities. So basically automating the next steps of that, right? This is an example. Competition-based positioning. So this is ideal if you deeply understand the market and have been able to identify gaps in existing products, right? So their weakness becomes your strength. Their weakness becomes your wedge. So this type of position breaks into two subcategories, audience-led and product-led. So in audience-led, competition-based positioning, you begin with an understanding of existing products. So it starts with your competitors. You identify a specific market segment that use those products, and then you find an area they're underserved. And then in product-led, competition-based positioning, you begin with an understanding of existing products, identify where your product fills an underserved gap, and then find a specific market segment to go after with this capability. All right. Let me know if you want to go deeper on positioning, because it's something I spend a lot of time on, and I think can get complicated. So an example of product-led competition-based positioning, 6 Sense is an ABM, account-based marketing platform. One of its product capabilities is identifying accounts that visit your website, right? I don't actually know the ACV of 6 Sense, but I think it starts at around 50K. Our B2B, which is a new startup, realized that company level identification isn't very useful. Person level identification is far more valuable. And so they focus there, right? So company level identification is, hey, Google visited your website, right? It's like, okay, well, Google has like tens of thousands of employees, like doesn't really tell you a lot, right? And so then your sales team just goes out and hammers everyone at Google. Whereas person level identification is, hey, Jane, the VP of marketing from Google just visited your website. Well, now all you have to do is reach out to Jane, right? And so that's the gap that our B2B found and served. You know, I think that they're doing like a product-led model, $99 a month. You know, for people that have this pain for 6 Sense, this is just an absolute no-brainer. Our B2B grew to like 4 million ARR in however long, 6 months or 12 months or something, right? And so position allows you to control the market's perception and gives your company an identity, right? An amplifier, so kind of a separate but related concept to positioning, is a contrarian edge, right? So this is where you find when your product or message challenges a common assumption or standard practice in your market, right? So it makes prospects think. Finally, someone sees things differently as actually solving it the right way, right? So our B2B is actually another good example of this with Contrarian Edge. Is part of their marketing was actually calling out Sixth Sense. I think they even got a cease and desist letter from Sixth Sense, right? And it benefited them. I mean, our B2B did very well because of it. And that was their Contrarian Edge, was like, hey, you're paying, $50,000 a year for a product that is basically crap. We're doing it for $99 a month. And so that was their Contrarian Edge, not the normal thing to do on social, explicitly call out competitors. You might be for or against that, but it did give them an edge. It got attention, and, no doubt they profited from that attention as well. And so some examples of Contrarian Edge could be price or business model, could be just philosophy, i.e. AI is the hot topic of the day. You could be like, well, we're not going to be AI first, or, all of our competitors have AI chatbots on their website. Well, we're actually going to allow you to speak with a human. And that could be sort of your philosophy. And yeah, just some tips on how to find your contrarian edge. That's enough there. Moving on. So some activities then in this gate. So drafting your wedge, feedback, and refinement. So drafting your wedge. So if you've done the previous activities and conducted enough structured interviews, you should have clarity with regards to how your product is communicated. I think when most people trip up, find it difficult, or unable to effectively communicate the product is because they haven't done the research, which results in things being fuzzy. So they just throw shit at a wall and hope it sticks, right? If this is you, I think a good rule of thumb, and it might not be great for all situations, but if as a founder you're ever feeling confused, you don't know what to build, maybe growth has stagnated, I think a good rule of thumb is just to speak with more of your customers. And if you don't have customers, speak to your market. Just have more conversation with your market, whether that be ICP, whether that be influencers, whether that be peers. Just have more conversations. And people aren't going to put it on a plate for you, but I think you will get to that point of clarity. Just speak with more people. It's just crazy how many people I've spoken with or worked with where they just haven't validated their assumptions. They've built an entire product or an entire feature without thinking to validate that first and see, is this actually what people want? So on the other hand, you might have had dozens of conversations, so therefore have a clear idea of what problems your customer has and an effective way to solve them, but you still struggle to communicate that, right? This is okay, and a much better position to be in than the former. It should be than. Poor English, because the foundations are there, but you just need the final 10 to 20% of refinement, right? Don't conflate these two situations. One situation is you don't actually know the problems. You don't actually know the customer. Situation two is you know the customer, you know the problems, you're just really struggling to communicate that, right? So a template for communicating your wedge was shared in your value prop. We help ICPs solve problem by unique approach. Generally, the unique approach is your differentiated product so they can outcome. Getting feedback, communicate this wedge to over 10 people as part of your structured interviews. And then what you're doing is you're looking for that positive feedback or negative feedback. Any kind of feedback is, that's interesting. Yeah, we'd love to try this. How can we sign up? Or on the other hand, yeah, this doesn't really excite me too much. Or any sort of level of feedback where they're not willing to commit. There should be a reason for that. Refinement. If nobody sees it as unique or interesting, refine and then conduct more structured interviews. Note what they specifically push back on, and don't take their response at face value. Dig for specifics. A kind of mental model I use when speaking with anyone about my product, whether it be research, whether it be friends, peers, customers, is the mental model I use is imagine this person is the worst product manager in the world, i.e. they just don't know how to build a good product. And it just forces you to not take what they say at face value, because everyone has an opinion, right? It doesn't mean it's right. It just forces you to go deeper, really get to the root cause of their opinion or their feedback. And quite often that's where the gold is, right? And so, everyone will happily tell you what features to build and this looks good or this doesn't, right? You need to go deeper and get to the first principles and then build from there, rather than taking everyone's opinion at face value. So how to verify this gate or this milestone? So at least 2 to 3 prospects have verbally said that's new, different, and they've expressed willingness to pay. This actually should be and, right? That's what we're pushing for. Right? Because without this, ultimately, this is what it matters about. We're not just looking for, oh, that sounds cool, yeah, keep us in touch. It's like, no, are you willing to pay money for this and have that problem solved? And you have a concise statement that you can show an advisor or founder peer, and it passes a sniff test, right? You can put your value proposition or your wedge in front of people and are like, holy shit, this is actually unique. Yeah, I think this would kill it, right? And of course, that's just qualitative feedback. Doesn't necessarily mean your product's going to be a winner, but there's some power there in sort of an initial sniff test, and ideally the person you're speaking to understands the problem themselves as well. So final gate here then, so minimal lovable product and early commitments, right? So situation here is that most founders I speak with have actually just skipped straight to here. They already have a minimal viable product, wouldn't necessarily say it's lovable. This is quite common. So don't worry, but it's just important that if you haven't already, you do go through the prior steps. You do the research, you understand the problem, you develop a wedge, because if, the mistake that most founders make who have skipped here is they just continue on this path, building the wrong thing, something that people don't want, and they just realize too late. So in this gate, the objective is to build something that delivers the value proposition and the wedge, right? And this doesn't necessarily have to be a software product. It can be a manual workaround or no code, right? So really important nuance is you don't actually have to have a product at this point, right? At the end of the day, people just want their problem solved. They just want to achieve whatever job they're trying to achieve. A lot of people don't care if they don't have to log into a front end, into a user interface. Like, a lot of people just want to offload the problem and have it solved. And so, by that token, it doesn't have to be software. So key concepts to understand here: minimal lovable product and proof of demand, right? So this is kind of where we get into where it's just going to be very situation dependent. I'm not going to go through here how to build an entire product end to end, front end, back end, database, authentication, all that kind of stuff. This is going to be really tailored to your situation, but just to kind of talk through it conceptually. So minimal lovable product. So this is about building the minimal version of your product that's also lovable, right? So it's a spin on the classic MVP. And the reason why is because what defines as viable has changed due to how much easier, faster, and cheaper it is to build products today, right? And to put it bluntly is people don't want to try crappy products, right? They just want to have their problem solved. And especially if you're building something that's not novel, and you say to a customer, hey, are you willing to try my kind of crappy product? But they have 10 products in the market that are similar, kind of do maybe 80% of the job, but they're just far more developed and mature products and make their life easier. They're probably going to take that choice, right? And so that's why it's minimal lovable. It has to actually be enjoyable, and it has to do the job better than other products, right? And so I say a rule of thumb: the more novel your wedge, right? So attractive and differentiated, the more you can get away with it. Your product being minimal. And the reason being is because you're just solving such an urgent problem in such a novel way that people are willing to ignore, the scrappiness and it being rough around the edges, right? Because you're probably giving them an advantage and they just want that no matter what. The less novel, the more developed your product solution has to be, because it's likely that something already exists, and so the bar is higher, right? And this is another fundamental issue with building something undifferentiated, is for a long while there's just going to be better products than you that are solving the same problem, and so it's just fundamentally better to be different. I'd also remain open to the possibility of not requiring a product at this stage and instead doing things manually, whether that be end to end or just behind the scenes, right? What we're doing here is we're just testing the core functionality, i.e., can I deliver the value proposition and will it deliver an impact to the customer, right? That's all we're trying to validate here. We're not trying to validate, do they like the design of my emails? Do they like the design of my user interface? Do we need email verification? Do we need Stripe? All these kind of things you're not trying to validate. You're just trying to validate core functionality, right? And those things I talked about can easily feel like you're being productive, and trust me, it's not. You need to validate the core functionality. And so why this matters, helps you avoid overbuilding, right? Founders often pour months and a lot of money into building extra features, and MLP focuses only on the critical problem that you're solving, right? Do you really need to focus time and effort building a great self-serve experience when you have low or no customers and will be working closely with them, right? No, you don't. Speed and flexibility. If you discover users want something different, you can pivot quickly without having to scrap a big code base, which there will be sort of a sunken cost fallacy there. Customer centric, you learn more from the actual usage rather than assumptions, right? So even if some steps are manual, like sending data from a spreadsheet, you will see if the user cares enough to keep using it, right? Which is really important. This is another thing, is like building the product is just step one. Do people actually use it? Do they activate? Do they return and keep using it? Do they make it part of their sort of weekly ritual, which is getting onto the next step in that framework. Okay, so second key concept, proof of demand. So this is tangible evidence that users need your product and will invest time or money into it, right? So it's how you de-risk any assumptions that you have. Now, why this matters, willingness to pay is, of course, a strong signal. Actual dollars, people putting their money where their mouth is, show users that people don't just like your product, but they're committing, they're willing to use it. Early adopters, even if a small user base commits, it indicates that you're tapping into a general pain point, just something to be aware of. Make sure it's not your friends. Investor team confidence. If you're looking to raise money, if you already have a team, depending on how you're capitalized, then having these early commitments, is this early sort of willingness to commit by customers and measured by revenue or LOIs, then that's going to give everyone confidence. Proof types then, so pre-orders or deposits, LOIs, letters of intent, beta waitlist signups with genuine interest, and of course like money, right? But that's kind of covered under pre-orders. So jumping into the activities for gate 3 then. So hacking together an MLP, of course, it's going to be very situational dependent, so more like guiding principles here. So you can quickly assemble this either using AI tools, various AI tools out in the market at the moment, offshore talent, or even no-code platforms that are going to help you validate your customer interests. Really want to avoid sinking, a lot of money at this stage. Building software can easily become one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. It can financially wreck you if you don't do it correctly. So just really try to validate your assumptions before going big. So why this matters, MLP before going like fully fleshed product, allow you to move fast and iterate, goes without saying. Cost efficiencies, so minimize your burn rate, and then strategy over features, right? It forces you to try validate that core functionality, that core problem, that core value proposition, that core thing that your product needs to do, rather than worrying about all the small stuff, which I think people can spend too much time on. How to do it, again, I don't want to get into this too much, but the way I like to do it is develop a PRD, which is a product requirement doc, which just outlines the core user flows, the features, the personas, the user stories, that kind of stuff. I'm not technical, I'm not an engineer. I can sort of get to a level with current AI tools, but they can only get you so far once the code base becomes quite big and complex, especially in B2B. You do need someone with engineering skills at some point. So this is just an example I created. And then, use AI tools, offshore talent. So AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Cursor can generate boilerplate code. VO and Lovable for the front end. I prefer Lovable, pretty much what I exclusively use for prototypes. And then offshore talent platforms like Upwork, TopTool, Lemon, Online Jobs can help you find great engineers at a reasonable price. And then don't be afraid of manual work, right? If it's going to take too long to build something, then do it manually in like a concierge style. Something I've seen people do is they have more of like an agency model, so they deliver a service, and they eventually figure out a way to automate that through their product. I can do more on this if you guys think it'd be useful for a separate video. And then run a closed beta. This is something I think is really important and a mistake that founders make. So why run a closed beta, right? So control. So it allows you to choose who gets access to your product. And so this ensures you're onboarding the right customers rather than dealing with a random mix of customers and bad fit customers that inevitably cause a lot of headache and wasted time. It also means you can manage the market perception more carefully, because your product's going to be scrappy. It's probably not going to be great. And so it allows you to have more control over that process, because, if negative word of mouth gets out, it can be quite damaging. Allows you to manage your feedback loops, so a smaller hand-selected group of people. It simplifies feedback gathering. All of the design partners for my startup, I have them on Slack in a one-on-one channel, and we communicate regularly. We have regular check-ins, and there's this understanding that they get access in return for feedback. And you'll catch deal breaker issues faster without juggling a flood of random user demands, right? So it's really good for like the feedback you're getting. Excitement, scarcity, closed beta can create a sense of exclusivity, which some people, are attracted by. And then how to acquire these beta customers. So social content, progress updates, product teasers, behind the scenes, even just, hey, I'm working on this problem. If you'd like to learn more, reach out. Outbound DMs, approaching, this is probably where most people are going to sit. I have like a daily non-negotiable list for LinkedIn where it's like 20 connection requests, 20 DMs out to people every single day. And you'll just, get conversations through that if you do enough volume. And then existing pipelines, if you've spoken with somebody a few months ago and you've made significant process, or you're now at a time where you can have a closed beta, reach back out to them and tell them, give them an update and get them insight to the product. This is like a visualization of what your funnel looks like at this stage. So you have traffic, pushing them to a wait list. You can either on a thank you page when somebody opts into the wait list, send them to a Calendly page where they can book a call, or you can send emails to the wait list and get them to book a call that way. And then when you're on the call, people either become a design partner, i.e. they help you build the product, and there's this mutual understanding that they have, either free or discounted access to your product in return for giving feedback, or they can become an influencer. Maybe they've got a bit of an audience online and they're interested in what you're building, they think it's cool. And maybe they can support with your launch and ongoing marketing, right? So trying to get the most out of every conversation you're having. I'm not going to go into these for this. So treat beta customers as high touch, high value, right? I think, again, this is maybe just like a jaded view that content has created for people, is where people are like, oh, this person's only paying me X amount of dollars. Like it's a waste of my time and they don't deserve my time. Like when you're pre-product market fit, you should be treating every single customer like they're, gold dust, because they're superheroes, right? They're people who have made a bet on your company when, they could easily go to a more mature company that probably solves their problem better. And so you should be treating them as with high touch and as if they're high value, because they are, right? And so these early evangelists are superheroes, right? They're giving you your company a chance, right? So some guiding principles here: onboard them properly. So don't just send them a link and say, hey, go sign up to the product. Schedule a kickoff call or an onboarding call, guide them through the core flow, maybe even do a reverse demo where you get them to share their screen and then they sign up to your product themselves and they use your product themselves. And so they're doing it themselves, and that kind of gets them across that. Because you've probably all had it all happen where you have a call, hey, you can sign up via this link, and a percentage of people never sign up. If you're doing a reverse demo, they're signing up on the call, and so it solves that. Communication cadence, set up a regular check-in, right? See how they're doing. Have this on the calendar as a recurring invite, otherwise it won't happen. Closed feedback loop. I like to get people into a dedicated channel in Slack. Tackle that however you want to, but ensure there's a regular cadence of feedback. And just going above and beyond to ensure they're using the product. If it means you having to use the product on their behalf and being hands-on, then do so, and then figure out how you don't have to do that in the future, right? You just need to be really in the weeds with your customers at this stage. Okay, that's all good. So how to verify you've solved this gate then? You can show literal proof, like we have this amount of revenue from these customers, or we have like a letter of intent from these companies, right? It's very black and white. There's no way to wiggle your way out of this. You've either got proof of demand or you don't, right? You either have built an MLP or you don't. If you can't get people to commit real dollars at this stage, you should not be thinking about doing like a big launch. You should not think about running a free trial, right? For all of the reasons I explained. So exit criteria for the entire stage one, right? So this is verification just for this milestone. For the entire stage one, which is problem solution fit, you have validated the problem, you've formed a wedge, and you've possibly collected 1 to 2 pay-in or strongly committed customers. Even if revenue is small, you're ready to shift to the next stage once you confirm that customers are actively using or seeing the potential of your solution. That's another thing, which we cover more so in stage 2, is paying you is one thing, right? But you actually want people to use the product. You actually want people to keep using the product, because that's how you know you have a good product, right? You don't want people, ghost customers who are paying you X dollars a month and just never use the product, because that just simply means you haven't built something valuable enough, right? And that's also going to come with its own issues. So summary of activities in stage 1: develop a market hypothesis and problem statement via structured interviews. Develop and refine your wedge via structured interviews and commitments. Build a minimal, lovable product and get early commitments or first paying customers. Run a closed beta program with a tight feedback loop and validate the wedge works, i.e. does it actually deliver an impact to the customer, right? People can say, yes, I'm interested in our call, but does it actually do the thing that you promised? So what you probably shouldn't be doing if you're at this stage, spending tens of thousands of dollars on development, prematurely launching a self-serve motion, delegating marketing or sales to someone else, building without stress testing your assumptions, prematurely trying to gain leverage through automation. You need to stay close to ground zero, and investing in long-term plays such as SEO, influencer marketing, or brand marketing, right? You need to be focused on short-term plays, getting customers, validating your assumptions, because you can invest a lot of time and effort in these things, and then you have to pivot or your assumptions were wrong. Final thoughts then. So I call this phase of a startup the eat shit phase, because that's exactly how it feels. And so don't worry about this. It's normal. Every day as a founder, it feels like the world is burning around you. This is normal. You just need to stick with it. Just increase your probability of success by ruthlessly stress testing your assumptions and by having a plan. Our speciality at Grow SaaS is helping you navigate this phase and reach your first $1 million in ARR. Feel free to book a call at growsas.com if that sounds good. Again, I showed some evidence at the beginning. Here's some more evidence. If you go to our website, you'll see even more evidence and learn a bit more about our process. So thanks for giving me your time, and I'll see you on the next one.